As part of Ferrari Fridays, William Ross from the Exotic Car Marketplace will be discussing all things Ferrari and interviewing people that live and breathe the Ferrari brand. Topics range from road cars to racing, drivers to owners, as well as auctions, private sales, and trends in the collector market.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the second episode of the Ferrari Marketplace. Today we're going to talk about the Ferrari 250 GTO. You know, the unicorn, the quintessential Ferrari, so to speak, out there in the Ferrari world and the Ferrari Marketplace. The one to own, as long as you're a billionaire. But real quick, sorry it's taking a little bit to get the second episode up and going. I kind of reviewed that first one, and I knew that first one was going to be a little rough because, hey, it was the first one I did. So I kind of was tightening some things up and put some more things together to try and make this a little more fluid and sound a little bit better. So hopefully this one goes a little bit better. But anyways, onward and upward, let's talk about the 250 GTO. So 60 years ago, in 1962, the Ferrari 250 GTO was unleashed on the world. Now, how this car came about was prior to the 61 season prior to that, the FIA for the World Championship, you could race, built specifically specifically racing prototype car to run for the World Championship. Well, for 1962, the FIA decided, so you know what, we're going to make these a homologated road-going Grand Touring car, GT car. Now, those will be the ones that will only be viable for points in the championship. So, Enzo saw us say, hey, we need to come up with some new cars here that's going to be for this. So, at the time, they really only had was a 250 SWB was what they kind of had that would fit the bill. Well, that wasn't going to work, so they needed to change it up. So, his man, Mr. Bizzarini, and I apologize if I hack up some of these names. I'm not Italian. So, anyways, he got to work on it, his little skunkworks operation there in Fried Ferrari, and started putting stuff together. Now, the rumor has it, that there was really no one specific person that was responsible for the body shape and designing the 250 GTO. Now, there were never any drawings done, nothing put to paper, no schematic, nothing. They just they put this thing together just with using their hands, metal, and just, hey, let's just do this, tweak this and whatnot. But throughout the years, it's kind of been, I would say rumor has it, or come down that possibly that actually Enzo's wind tunnel model maker guy, Edmondo Millimeter Casoli, was actually kind of one of the major contributors to the shape and design of the car. Now, like I said, he's never really gotten direct credit, but in reading stuff like that, and you talk to people, and back then you read enough stuff, it seems to be that he was like the biggest contributor to the shape and design of this car, because as you know, that shape is nice, it's beautiful, and aerodynamic, and going. So, hey, someone that builds models for the wind tunnel, I guess would be the man, kind of would do it. So, but anyways, Bizzarini's team, and he started out, but as we all know, in 1961, the big old Palace Revolt happened, and Bizzarini, along with some other top line engineers and consigliaries, I guess you could say, were sent packing. They were not happy about Enzo's wife coming out on the shop floor and kind of telling them what to do and all this stuff, and they were basically like, look, either she goes or we go, and, well, I guess we know who won. Enzo's wife won. So those guys all left. So it was basically kind of turned over to a 26-year-old Mario Fogheri. And he had to pick up the pieces and kind of get moving on this and do it. So him and the other guys that got brought in that team that were still there, and some new people that brought in, ended up putting this thing all back together, getting it completed. What's kind of surprising is, usually Pininfarina was the one that was going to be designing, especially the road cars, but they really had no influence or anything on this. It was all done in-house, and like I said, it was just hammered and welded together without a single drawing or scale model. Nothing was ever drawn on paper or something, so it was pretty impressive. As we know, designer, coach, builder, Sergio Scaglietti, he inherited and he got the final shape and tweaked and everything like that and going. So that's who kind of got this thing, to the finish line and regarding to get this thing all taken up. Kind of an interesting story regarding how the 250 GTO name came about. Because as we know, that it was actually derived from the 250 SWB. And, and that was one of the things. There were 100 cars needed to be made to appease the FIA and doing it. And as we know, Enzo in his way was able to, I guess, sway or, get the FIA to agree. The fact is, well, this is just the 250 SWB with tweaks and, changes and whatnot. Other competitors, other manufacturers all kind of livid about it. But, hey, that's the kind of power and sway he had. So they were able to do it. But what happened is when they were getting ready to, when they did the registration for the first race, it actually got sent over. It was official. It was a 250 GT competition 62 Berlinetta. It became known as the 250 Gran Turismo Omologato. But when it got registered for that first race over in the United States, it was actually put down on paper. And now it's kind of unknown. There's a couple different things for this, either due to kind of a language barrier, because telephones back then and doing whatnot and paperwork and not be able to understand the handwriting and whatnot. It was supposed to be entered as 250 GT-O. But somehow, either there's two stories. One is just through subsequent, language barriers. They put GTO, or the other story is a secretary, typist, whoever was handling all the entries and whatnot, just dropped a hyphen and just made it GTO. So there you go. So it was never actually designated from Ferrari as 250 GTO. It actually became that through a clerical error or through a language barrier issue. So I always thought that was kind of funny and interesting about that, how it came about. And that's, just a few other stories about that, how those cars came about and got their name. I mean, look at the Daytona. That car was never officially called the Daytona from Ferrari. It was just because of the winning the race, the 24 Hours of Daytona, and it just kind of stuck. So anyways, so it's got a couple of those instances in there. So anyways, now with that season, so what they did is, to get things moving, there's on record, and there's another argument that kind of gets tossed around, and is there were, some say 36, some say 39. It all depends on how you look at it, because the last series they kind of all of a sudden considered a 330 GTO because it's got the 4-liter engine and it's got the Series 2 bodywork. So, and others say, okay, and then there's the 36 that are actually true GTOs because they have the original 3-liter engine and 3-liter V12 and the original bodywork. So, it's up in the air, because like I said, they had the Series 1 bodywork, and then they did the subsequent Series 2 bodywork ones. And, as you can tell when you look at them, you can clearly tell between the Series 1 and Series 2. The Series 2 bodywork is a lot more aerodynamic. It's a lot, looks more squatty, a little and longer and a little wider. You can definitely tell the difference between the two. So that's why that argument's made. Some people say, well, it's not really a 250 GTO because it has a bigger engine, a totally different body, whatnot. But I say, no, it is because it's basically just a continuation of it. So it's, however you want to look at it. In my opinion, hey, they're all GTOs, and they're all just absolutely gorgeous. So that's my opinion. I said you're going to get that argument amongst other people. So, because like I said, some people say 36, some say 39. I say 39, but hey, that's me. So anyways, so right out of the gate, these things were super competitive. These things were doing phenomenal. Solid car, very reliable. It was very easy to drive. It was, a great car to compete in, because you got to remember, back then for the World Championship races, you weren't just driving, doing a 250 mile race on a road course or whatnot. Back then for the championship, you had endurance races. You had 24-hour races. You had 3-hour races. All these endurance races. You had hill climbs. You had these rallies. You had the 10-day Tour de France race. That's 10 days over is the whole race. Doing all these little things. That if you look up the history of that race, it consisted of all these different recce's and whatnot. That you had to do for the race. To win the whole thing. So it's interesting. how the championship was, I guess won because you had to be disciplined in a lot of different facets of racing a car, not just, hey, going around a track for, 2-3 hours and doing it. So I always had great respect for those guys back then. That's because of the fact is that's what it is. I mean, you had to be, I don't want to say dominant, but you had to be pretty good in all types of, all different disciplines of racing. So, that first year, I think it was, they won pretty much a majority of the races. So they won the championship, and they won again. They actually won it in 62, 63, and 64. So they won 3 years going. So, but the problem is by that time, in 64, the writing was coming on the wall because that's when old Carroll Shelby came storming in with his Cobras and, hell-bent on wanting to beat Ferrari because he just despised Enzo and doing it. So actually, after the 1964 season, now going to 65, yeah, they were all, still raced. The GTOs were still raced, but all under privateer teams. Ferrari didn't have any more factory efforts regarding that back in the 250 GTO on the factory level after the 64 season and just left all the privateers. And subsequently, Carroll Shelby ended up winning and decimating, blowing doors off with his Daytona Coupes in the 65 season. And, those were phenomenal cars too. And that's a totally different podcast. So anyways, these cars, as people say, they're not, they're beautiful, whatnot. They're not perfect. They're pretty straightforward. I mean, if you ever look at them, they don't even have any side mirrors on them. And I was saying, as Enzo thought was, well, who cares behind you? I'm always going forward, and I'm in first place. Who cares behind me? So anyways, none of those GTOs, they have any side mirrors, which I always find was kind of interesting. So in getting to it, but, so as a subsequent, into the later 60s, the GTO, I mean, it was becoming a old, tired racing car. So, I mean, obviously, if someone can see the future, everyone would be billionaires, right? So no one's going to think to themselves, oh, this car is going to be worth, 30, 40, 70 million dollars someday. That doesn't enter your mind. You don't think you just look at it as an old tire race car. Now, these cars were, designed and built to be driven on the street, be a street, it's a regular driving car, daily driving car, and then drive to the track, race, and drive home with it. Could you do that? Yeah, can you drive on the street? But it was a bit of a tricky wicket to drive these cars. You got to get that thing above 3,500 RPM to really start getting the thing kind of moving. Anything below 3,500, I mean, that thing just doesn't want to go. It's just like, so you got to kind of get that thing up in the rev range to really get that thing moving. So it was a bit of a tricky wicket, and said in traffic, whatnot, overheat, one thing. It needs the airflow going to it. I mean, the car was designed to be a race car, but for homologation reasons, yeah, it was still a street car technically. So, but you need that airflow going through the car to really kind of get that thing cooled down and do what it's supposed to do and get that thing all nice and lively. So, not a lot of people would do it. Now, obviously, I think the one person that's kind of most famous for driving that around is our old Phil Spector, driving it around in California. He was well known for that and driving it very fast and just being an idiot. But there's really not too many stories of a lot of sites and what. I know there's one guy, it's a movie producer that owns one that he ended up buying it because he had seen it when he was young, and he's like, I want to buy that car someday. Seeing, and again, it's driving on California. I mean, I don't know where else you might see these things back then, but anyways, by that time though, late 6 or 7, I mean, these things were changing. I mean, there was the one instance, the guy, bought it as privateer. He raced, he bought it for like 10 grand, raced it whatnot for a few years. And then by the time he was done, he sold it for $3,600. I think it was in 67 or 68, something like that, 66 maybe. But anyways, imagine that. Well, of course, you look at the dollar exchange, okay, what $3,600 was back, compared to today. So what, mid-20s maybe, mid-30s? Would that be a rough thing? I mean, I don't know. I'm not a financial person. But anyways, I mean, even, back then, $3,600 was still a decent amount of money. But, no, shit, I mean, even 10 grand was. But, these things being, I think, newer are 18 grand technically in dollars and cents. But, it wasn't what, people look at it as today. It was just looked at a tire race car. So these things were trading hands, getting sold for very little money. There's one that was sitting behind. It was in a field, I said, but I think it was sitting for 15 years in a field behind a shop class because some guy that owned it was a race car guy, racing guy, and he was done with it, so he just donated it to the local, what how would you call it, machine shop or technical school, and do it, and it just sat back there forever because they really couldn't do anything with it because where were they going to get parts for it? But anyways, subsequently, obviously it was bought and redone, and I believe that's the one that Ralph Lauren owns, was that one that was found in that field. So, or sat in that field for that long a time. So, I mean, and here's the thing is all of them are accounted for, and majority of them are driven and raced on a regular basis at vintage events, which is awesome. I was just down at Cavallino a few weeks back, and there were 3 of them there at that show. And what's awesome about Cavallino is the fact is a lot of these shows you go to and those kind of cars, I mean, when you're talking what they're worth, they're behind velvet ropes. And so the closer you get to them is about 5 feet. Well, which is awesome about Cavallino is they're parked there. You can get right up to it. You look right in the windows of them, everything like that. And, when they're getting judged, they start them up. It's awesome. I got to tell you, if you get the opportunity, now tickets aren't cheap. It's $250 a ticket to go. But if you're a Ferrari person and you love Ferraris, you need to put that on your bucket list of things to do is go to the Cavallino Classic down in Palm Beach. It's in the end of January, usually is how they do it. But it's a 4-day event. Now, I mean, they have subsequent other things going on, but Saturday's the good day where everything's out in the field and they do all the judging, everything like that. But you want to see some of the most gorgeous Ferraris you'll ever see. I mean, it's awesome. I mean, this year was great because, being this is the 75th anniversary of Ferrari, they had one model from every year. Now, they had some years they had multiple models for that year, but they had at least one model from every year, and there were some just absolutely drop-dead gorgeous vehicles. I mean, look up online, go on there and look for videos of it. I got a couple real short ones on there from being there. I felt a little odd kind of trying to shoot video because you got some very, very high net worth individuals walking around, and I wasn't sure about people wanting to be on film or not. So, and I didn't want to have to go, hey, can you sign off on this? You okay with this? So I didn't want to bother with that. So I only did a couple real quick ones. But anyways, so obviously as time passes on and get going, these things start increasing in value and, going up, and the prices start getting up there like in the 80s. People start paying more and more for these cars and getting up there. And, first it's, hey, all right, first time it breaks, $1 million. And then I think the one was it sold for like back then, I think it was 80s something. Can't remember exact. I can't read my own notes. It was, sold for about $1 million, and 2 years later they sold for like 4.2. So, and this was in the late 80s, mid to late 80s. And then now subsequently starts going up because it's kind of one of those deals, something starts going like that, the marketplace is going to start dictating it. So all of a sudden, it sells for that. Okay, so the one I own should sell for that. Now, here's the one thing about the cars. Now, a lot of them have, different histories to them and whatnot, accidents, crashing, everything like that. Now, like the one, so far, the highest sale one that went to our man, Mr. McNeil, that owns WeatherTech. So rumor has it, he's never confirmed or denied it, that, he paid $70 million for his back in 2018 in a private sale. But now his had Le Mans history, and I think it was, unmolested. I think it never, no accident damage. I mean, you might have some little things here, but never like any structural, like huge crashes. Because you got quite a few out there. And these were race cars. They were raced hard. And, they're going to subsequently have damage to them, and it's going to happen. So there's some out there that aren't worth quite as much. And there's the one that sold, what was it, 26, or was it the one that just sold recently? I think, it was like it went for 40-some million, but that was at the auction at Sotheby's. I think it was Sotheby's or Gooding, one of the two. Actually, the person that drove it was killed in it. So it's actually kind of got that kind of history, and it was banged up pretty good. But still, it still went for quite a bit of money. So it really doesn't deter people, but, it gets you in that club. Because you have quite a few of the owners of these have owned them for quite a lengthy period of time. Obviously they love the car. They love what it does and what it is. And there's numerous private events just for the GTO owners that go on throughout the years here and there that, it's a to go to it, you got to own a 250 GTO. So, you got these real, obviously upscale, private, very private. And if you're a member of that club, hey, you know what? Kudos to you. So obviously you were doing something right in life, or as subsequently some of these people that have bought them they have born into the right gene pool. So anyways, my thoughts on this, I love the car and like that. I mean, they're saying that it's more than likely, and how long and whatnot, but these will be $100 million cars. That's what the rumor is. That's what people are saying. They're saying, how long will it be? In 10 years, 20 years? Who knows? It's getting to the point, though, it's going to be interesting because quite a few of the owners, especially long-term owners that have had them, they're, up there in age, and with what's going on regarding, estate tax, all that kind of stuff, when you pass these things on, the family members, unless it's, a hugely wealthy family, just they can't absorb, the inheritance tax, estate tax, what have you, however it goes. I mean, I know these people, they're rich, so they got ways to work around it. They set up these trusts and do that kind of crap. But some of these people just might not be able to keep it just because they can't afford it. So they turn around and they have to sell it. And then a nice amount of the money, obviously goes to pay taxes. So, which kind of sucks. So it's going to be interesting, though, because I said there's quite a few owners that are getting to the stage in life that, they're going to be passing on. And so it's going to be interesting to see if they come to market, or they stay in the family, or if the kids get it and then they just do sell it. Because you see that quite a bit in this market, not just in Ferraris, but in any kind of collector car, hypercar marketplace that is the younger generation. They're just not into cars. You have a lot of these gentlemen that have these great collections and whatnot, and the family, the kids, the younger generations don't want nothing to do with it. So they got to figure out what to do with the stuff. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here in the next, say, 5 to 10 years with some of these. Like you said, some of these people are getting up there in age. It's going to be an interesting out in the marketplace to see what happens, to see how this comes about. So I'm very curious to see what plays out. So, but I think I kind of want to mention the one probably. I don't want to say he's most famous, but one of my most favorite guys that owns one of these is our man, the drummer from Pink Floyd, Mr. Mason. He's owned his since '78. And there's a great story behind his is when they're, 86, 87, when they were going to, obviously come back and go back on tour, they needed to come up with the money for it. And he actually put up his GTO as collateral to the bank so they could get the money, the money needed up front to get the tour up and going. So he actually put it up as collateral for that. That's awesome. That shows you what the values back then and how they looked at it. So that was able to get them up and going and get what they needed to do. But he races his all the time. He's very, very active in the Ferrari world with his GTO. And there's a great video that came out just a little bit ago. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but, Kid in the Candy Shop, Kid in the Sweet Shop, something like that. It's a Jody Kid. She has her own, YouTube channel that she does, and she goes around and talks to people. But she went and saw, and what was awesome, it wasn't Nick himself, it was his wife that she actually went and she met with. And then Nick's wife took the GTO out, and Jody took out 250 SWB, I think it was. And they followed each other, went somewhere. But I thought that was awesome. And tell you what, she tore it. She's a heck of a racer herself in her own right. I mean, she can put it to it. So kudos to her. I love seeing that. Seeing that it's involved. And I know his kids, get involved too big time with doing all the historic racing and that, because he's got several other cars that he also owns in that. So kudos to him. But anyways, it kind of gives you a kind of a brief synopsis of my thoughts and everything and history on the GTO. And I think, where things might be going. I'm sure I could probably talk for hours on this if I get something else, talking about it. We could talk forever on these things and all the stories and everything about it. But I just kind of wanted to get into a little brief on it, just kind of thing, just because, hey, it's the 60th anniversary of it getting unleashed out onto the world, into the racing world, and history being made. So that's what I wanted to talk about. So, hey, guys, I really appreciate it. And again, I'm trying to get the hang of this and getting these things put together correctly in these podcasts. So I apologize if he's being a little rough and maybe my talking not as smooth as it needs to be. and doing some ums a lot and stuff like that. So I'm working on it. So you got to give me a little time. So, but again, hey, I appreciate you guys listening, and take care and stay safe.
This episode has been brought to you by Grand Touring Motorsports as part of our Motoring Podcast Network. For more episodes like this, tune in each week for more exciting and educational content from organizations like the Exotic Car Marketplace, the Motoring Historian, Break Fix, and many others. If you'd like to support Grand Touring Motorsports and the Motoring Podcast Network, sign up for one of our many sponsorship tiers at www.patreon.com/GT Motorsports. Please note that the content, opinions, and materials presented and expressed in this episode are those of its creator, and this episode has been published with their consent. If you have any inquiries about this program, please contact the creators of this episode via email or social media as mentioned in the episode.